Don't touch that dial.
Welcome back to the Behind the Bits podcast, where my guest and I talk serious about stand-up comedy. This is episode 8, and my guest is Zach Funk. He is a comic from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he has an album that just came out last year called Brains Are Weird. It's a really good album, and it's available at all the outlets, Bandcamp, Amazon, Apple. You can get it everywhere. We talked a lot about making that album, the nuts and bolts of how a comic can put an album out. We also talked about mental health, which is important to a lot of stand-up comic. You can catch him on all the social media outlets I put on the show notes, and also check out his YouTube channel he started with Joe Kira called Is It Worth a Sandwich? They look at a video game and see, is it worth the price of a sandwich? Pretty cool YouTube channel, and I've watched a couple videos and it's really good. Without further ado, here is Zach Funk. Welcome back to the Behind the Bits podcast. I'm still Scott Curtis, and today I have Zach Funk, a comedian from Pittsburgh. We got together via Twitter. Welcome to the show, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me be here. I'm glad to do it.
Great. I was, as I told you before we started recording, I was appreciative that somebody reached out to me. Starting a new podcast is always a struggle, and I celebrate it whenever anybody reaches out to me. So it was very nice, and it was really cool that you got me when you did, because I noticed that, you know, just last year you released your album, your comedy album, Brains Are Weird. And I have gotten to listen to that a few times, and it's fantastic. I got to tell you, I know who you are from that particular comedy album. You've definitely got your own voice and your own personality, and everybody says that's what it takes to be a good comic. So you're definitely pushing all the buttons there.
Thank you. I still laugh sometimes. I did a show years ago for this guy who books a lot of stuff in Pittsburgh, and we didn't really end up working together. But he saw me do a 10-minute set, and when I got off stage, he said, "I really like your character." And I thought, "Oh yes, that was certainly a character. None of that was true."
You never know. I mean, Emo Phillips may be exactly how he is. Who knows?
Yeah.
One of the things I'd like to talk to everybody about is, first of all, how you got started in doing stand-up and how long you've been at it.
So I started summer 2011.
Okay.
So this will be 9 years this summer. I've always loved comedy since I was a little kid. Like, I used to go to bed listening to stuff like Steve Martin, Let's Get Small, and things like that. Mm-hmm. I loved just the Muppets as a kid. Just anything that drew comedically, I was always very drawn to. And my dad, he was an attorney, but he loved to write. And he had a very dry sense of humor. And I remember having a lot of like just car rides as a kid where we never had like the boring father-son car ride. We would make up stuff in the car. Like one year going to my grandparents' place for Christmas Eve, we on like the hour car ride, we wrote 3 Christmas song parody at my grandparents' house. And then also comedy has helped me a lot. Just in my own life, like I mentioned, my dad there, he died in a random car accident when I was 11, and being able to laugh after that helped me. A lot of it was just I spent time just being sad and watching like SNL and Kids in the Hall reruns on Comedy Central, and it helped me get through some stuff.
I can definitely understand that.
Yeah, but comedy, it's that thing of, you know, there's so much in life where you can laugh about it or you can cry about it, and sometimes you don't have a choice. But if you do have a choice, I would rather try to laugh about it. And I've found there are so many things that you can tackle through humor and address versus just saying to someone, well, here's this. But if you kind of put it in a funny way, it sticks with them.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks who don't understand what comedy is all about see it as kind of a defense mechanism sometimes, but it really is a coping and a healing mechanism. I mean, there's a lot of studies out there that say that laughter has healing properties, and that's both for physical and mental ailments.
Exactly. There's this. You can tell from watching my stuff, I love comics. There's this great comic book series called Kabuki, which is where I based my first tattoo off of. There's a kind of a running plot through it where they talk about the old idea of alchemy, of where people would try to turn lead into gold, and you can do that taking the traumas you've been through, taking the negative things in your life and making something positive out of it, using it to be creative, using it to help you be kinder and help others. And I really try to do that both on and off stage. I've had enough bad things happen externally and internally, but it can make you cold to the world, but it doesn't have to.
That's very good insight. I wanted to find out what your I talked to a lot of people about their first experience doing stand-up, and it's the same for everybody. It's awkward and it sucks, and either that or it's great, and then your second one's awkward and it sucks. But coming up in the Pittsburgh scene, did you have like a core group of comics that you were able to lean on and learn from as you were starting out?
I definitely had a few people that were really helpful when I first started. Only one of them is still performing. His name is Ron Placone. He is a hilarious guy, does a lot of really smart political stuff. Two of the people that were very helpful when I first started were a guy named Dan Genesis, who no longer performs, and Ben Kenny, who no longer performs. And there were people who were more experienced in the Pittsburgh scene and just liked what I did from the start. And gave me some really helpful advice. Like one of the things that I try to tell people when they're starting, if they ask me, is, like if you're learning to play guitar, it's okay. I will do this in private until I figure it out and go do it in public. I know I'm doing it right in public, whereas with comedy, you have to do it in public to learn it.
Yeah.
So, when you first start out at open mics, it's always, this is my third time on stage. This is my seventh time on stage. Once you pass the point where you're actively like, oh yeah, this is my, how many times have I gone up now? Like, then you can really kind of start evaluating how you're doing. But up until that point, it is just trial by fire, failure, and learning what you want to do. Like when I first started out, I do a lot of storytelling, and I would try to write your classic, just like set up punchline jokes. And I found I can write those, but I can't perform them well. So I have to build them into a narrative, and that's part of the learning process. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. It's funny when you talk about having our practice is being in front of people. And one of the things I like to do is crash music open mics and go up. And the first thing I always say is, all these musicians are great, but they get to practice at home. They can practice their guitar, their keyboards, their drums, and they can do that for hours, days, months, years. Guess what? This is my practice, and what you hear is what you get. So yeah, I can definitely, you can write and write and write, and you can talk to yourself in the car, you can talk to the mirror. I talk to my wife, but there is no substitute for actually being in front of an audience and finding out where the laughs fall.
Exactly. And you can't be a comedy cover bander.
Right.
Have to build.
Yeah, no doubt. I've seen a few of those. That's
I've heard they exist, but it's like, oh, you're the person who looks vaguely like the president and you go to parties and pose for pictures. It's not like it's a thing to do, but it's not an art.
Yeah. Yeah. So going to the Brains Are Weird album, that's right about at 60 minutes of entertainment right there. How long did it take you to get all that material together?
I don't know. Basically, it was something where I had thought about first recording the album maybe like 3 years ago. It was an idea I'd thought about where it was like, I've been doing comedy for 5 or 6 years. And as someone who had like a writing background, I thought, okay, well, if I were writing short stories for 5 or 6 years, at a certain point, I'd want to say, okay, this is a collection of short stories, or this book is done. Not that I'm stopping comedy, but I wanted to have like a solid document as opposed to just a collection of shows I've been on. And then for a while, I was in a really serious relationship and just wasn't as focused on comedy, so that kind of fell to the wayside. And then that ended, so I started focusing more on the album. And basically, at that point, it was I knew I had when I decided to do it. Half an hour of it was definitely set in stone. I knew like, okay, I want to do this bit. I want to tell this story. I definitely want to do this. And then the rest of it was kind of going over 7 years worth of stuff and saying, okay, here's the thing I tried in the second year I was performing and I haven't touched in 4 years. Is this something that's worth revising and making a polished thing, or should I just forget this ever existed?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of that, and just kind of, there were some things that were I put on the album that at the time were relatively new, but I liked them. And I run into the problem of I get tired of my material easily sometimes. So like there are comedians I know who they'll do the same 5 minutes at open mics for years. And, if that's your thing, that's your thing. But to me, it just, I get bored with it. It's fun to go back and revise. Because I don't write things out word for word. If anything's written out, it's bullet points, and even then mostly it's just kind of in my head. And then through repetition, I kind of figure out a rhythm to it. And you can toss lines in here and there. And then there was even stuff like there's a story I tell on the album that's about a 10-minute long story that I barely ever did on stage, just because unless you're doing if you're only doing like a 15-minute set. If you decide I'm going to tell this 10-minute story, well, that's most of your set, and it's your script. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So there were certain things where it was, even though I haven't had a chance to practice as much, I definitely want to put it on here just because I have the time to do it.
Right. And your style is definitely it's different than the setup punch style. Yours is more setup punch, and then set up. And so you even mentioned the comedy rule of threes in the one bit. But yours, your stories flow, and there's good laugh quality all the way through the story. So a lot of folks say that you got to get so many laughs per minute to be successful. The way you do it, I felt like it flowed well. I was laughing, and yet I was able to stick with the story at the same time. So it was kind of Mark Twain-y a little bit. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed it. So thinking about having the material and wanting to do an album, I've always wanted to know what it takes, nuts and bolts wise, to get an album done. So can you take me through that?
Sure. So part of it was just kind of deciding in myself, okay, this is a thing I'm definitely going to do, because when you have a lot of depression and self-doubt issues, I think that's often the hardest step.
Yeah.
Is just, okay, no, I'm definitely going to do this. It's not just going to be an idea I think about for 3 years. And then it was finding a venue. I recorded it at Mr. Small's Funhouse in Pittsburgh. Mr. Small's is a very large. Pittsburgh uses a lot of old buildings and repurposes them. Originally, it was a church and a school attached to the church. So the main church building is its main venue that can hold easily a few hundred people, and then the fun house is their smaller secondary event. So I knew the people that booked the fun house. They have a weekly, mostly music, but they allow some speaking and comedy there. People I met through that, and I thought it was the right kind of room I wanted to do, and it was the right kind of number. I really liked the atmosphere, and it wasn't just a straight traditional Pittsburgh comedy room. Where like Pittsburgh has, we have an improv, but they don't really do stuff with local acts a lot. And then we have a local place called the Arcade Comedy Theater, which is a really great room for comedy. But I didn't want to do it there. So I talked to the people that booked the Funhouse. Hey, you know me, you know what I do. I think I'd like to record an album at your venue. What would that cost to get the room for a night? I want to do either a Friday or a Saturday, just so people from out of town could come to it. But other than that, I didn't really have an exact date and time. I just wanted something at least 5-6 months out, so I had time to let people know about it. I kind of half jokingly, half seriously said to a lot of friends, like, listen, I'll probably never get married, so considering this traveling thing. And so they were really great, where basically to book the Funhouse, I didn't have to give them money up front. It was just a thing of, I had to meet a certain threshold in ticket sales, and then if I didn't meet that, I owed them the difference. And then after that, it was we split the tickets after that. So once I got the venue booked, it was just through doing comedy and doing different things. Like I've helped out with a lot of other things in the Pittsburgh area, where I was like, all right, well, I know a good sound engineer, so I'm going to contact this person and find out what's your rate to record a live show. And mix it and master it. My album art was done by a friend of mine who named Nick Paloe, who is a comedian improviser who's now based in LA. Also a really great graphic designer. And we met years and years ago. So I thought, okay, because I wanted to try to make sure it was something where anyone I worked with, I would say that, like, what is a fair rate for? Basically, it was, this is my tax return for the year. I'm going to use that to fund everything for the year. And I didn't want it to be something like, hey, give me a special deal. I'm a firm believer in, pay people what they're worth. If you want to charge me less because you're my friend, that's great, but I'm not going to ask you to do that.
Right.
So it was just a matter of finding the right people. The name Brains Are Weird was something that I had settled on a long time before that, partially because of the mental health aspect, but also it's something that I say both to myself and my friends a lot. I'm very often the therapist. So when friends are feeling depressed or stressed out or things like that, and they come to me and they'll say like, well, I'm feeling all these different things. What do you think? I'll be like, well, first of all, before we get to all that other stuff, let's just establish brains are weird. We don't make sense.
Right.
So don't beat yourself up for feeling how you feel, because that's just going to make it worse.
Right.
You feel sad. Okay. If you're upset, you feel sad, you're just going to feel sadder. Spiral and cycle. Right. So it's just learning. So Brains Are Weird just means learning to accept ourselves for who we are, for the good and the bad, and just saying, yeah, that's just how it is. It's not, having a mental illness or having a bad day, it doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you're human. Right. So after that, it was just a matter of, once I got the date booked and everyone lined up in terms of who would record it, I talked to one of my best friends in comedy, Krish Mohan, who's a great political comedian, and he's somebody who's been a big supporter of mine. He started about 2 years before I did. He travels all around the country at this point, and he had recorded some of his albums locally. And so I asked him for advice on, like, hey, what did you use for distribution? How did you make sure this got on iTunes, got on Spotify, and things like that? So he gave me some good resources for that aspect of it. And it was just, working at it and getting it put together. Yeah, that's kind of it.
And you recorded the whole thing in one night. So yeah. That's a start to finish.
Yeah, it was the kind of thing where I know a lot of time comedians will book two shows back to back in the same night, or one night and the next night, and mix the two together. But I couldn't really afford to do that in terms of venue booking and getting people there and everything like that. And Arcade, which I mentioned earlier, has a weekly show they do called Beta Stage, where it's a place for like experimental comedy and things like that. So the week before, Beta Stage is an hour-long block. So they let me book Beta Stage for that week. So I had at least one chance to test out the full hour by itself. And even that I ended up cutting some stuff from, because that only drew about 10 people. And when you do an hour for 10 people versus doing an hour for 100 people, you got to factor in, okay, well, there are going to be longer laugh breaks. There are going to be more things. So maybe I'll cut a little bit of stuff here.
Right.
So I only even had the one chance to properly do it all together. Otherwise, it was just some of it was things you've been doing over years. So it's like, all right, I know this 10 minutes is going to go together, and I know this 10 minutes is going to go together. I know this 10 minutes is going to go together. It's deciding what order everything would go in, what kind of flowed the most.
Right. The funny thing is, I've listened to that a couple times, and if you would have done that in 2 nights, you would have had to have that lady that was laughing so loud on both nights, or your continuity would have been fucked up.
Yeah, well, she's one. That's my dear friend Megan, and if I did 2 nights, she definitely would have been there for both nights.
Yeah, I mean, it was infectious, but I would have definitely noticed if she wasn't on a track.
Yeah, she is one of my absolute best friends in the world, and it is a treasure anytime I can bring her to a comedy show.
Right. Right.
Every performer is just like, this is great. It's like having 10 extra people here.
Yeah. When you got the master, it was probably pretty easy to edit since you were just doing one take.
I mean, luckily, so the person I hired, Brandon Martin, to engineer it, he sent me a master. I told him where to split the tracks up, and then he split it from there.
That's great. And then it's obviously up on Bandcamp, and I think can you get that through Amazon and iTunes?
Yeah. Just recently, because literally the week after it was like 2 days after I got the master back and everything was split into files and I got it on Bandcamp, my laptop died. So that took away some momentum. But at this point, it's on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Spotify, pretty much any major online service it should be on.
That's great. And I shortchanged you. Your album is an hour and 11 minutes. The other album I was listening to is a guy from Grand Rapids, and he came in at just under an hour. So you had a lot of content there.
Yeah, I was surprised at how long it ended up, because it was just like I said, I only had the one chance to even practice it, and even from that one practice thing, I cut stuff.
Right. I guess you're lucky in that you do very personal stuff, and it's very easy to remember your own shit, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, when it's a lot of this, here's the thing I've been through, let me tell you about it.
Yeah.
It makes it easier than, wait, how does this story go? It's a fictional thing.
Right. So did the priest actually really say that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the priest who told me bad customers go to hell, that is 100% true story.
Yeah. See, you folks will have to get the album to hear the whole story, but that was a good one.
Yeah, that stuff. So I won't go into like the exact location I work at, but I still work at the same hardware store chain. I've been in a few different departments by now, and if not from the very beginning, from shortly after I started working there, anytime I have those weird type of things happen, I keep track of them. I post them online. I call it customer interaction of the day, which is why I named the one track that.
Yeah.
So that was part of it, even just going back over years of customer interactions, deciding, because there's a fine line between being, I'm Zach and I worked at a hardware store, and being Zach, the hardware store guy.
Right.
So it was deciding just a few select ones to put on there. And that was a lot of fun looking over, like, here's a weird thing that happened 5 years ago. I totally forgot about that. It's a good thing I posted that on Facebook and couldn't look it up again.
Yeah, it's funny because I worked in restaurants and retail for my 20s into my early 30s, and I could probably do a couple hours just on the stuff that happened in there. I mean, the people you work with, the people that come in, it's nuts. I got a little bit of feedback there, and I'm going to mark this so I edit there we go. And the album came out. It came out towards the end of last year. Was that right?
So I first got it up on Bandcamp back in May, actually.
Okay.
And then it was near the end of last year where I was able to get it on iTunes and Spotify and all that other stuff.
Okay. And just as a marker, do you keep track of how many people listen and download and stuff like that?
I look at it when I can. Each thing works different. Like Bandcamp, for example, every time someone buys my album on Bandcamp, I get a notification on my phone right away. So that's always nice. Mm-hmm. It's even more exciting when I don't recognize the person. Sometimes it's like, my friend bought this. Great. I can, send them a thank you message.
Right.
Other stuff, it's you just check every now and then, see where your stats are at. It's as somebody who is still relatively obscure, it's doing about what I think it would do, but I'm trying to post more stuff online. I've been submitting to a lot of comedy festivals lately, so I'm trying to do more to push that and push myself.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a good resume to have when you're trying to get into the festivals, for sure.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to it makes you see, no matter how good or bad your album is, to be able to say, I got people to show up for an hour and felt it was worth recording and releasing. It shows you're not just like some random person who got a mic.
Right, no doubt. So as far as your performing area is concerned, do you stick around Pittsburgh, or how far do you go to perform?
Let's see here. I'm mostly in Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh area, at least, just because of still having like a regular day job where I'm full time, and that makes it hard. My job's good about if I say like, oh, I have a show this night at 8 o'clock, I can still work. I just need to be done by 6. They're good about stuff like that. But having 2 to 4 days off in a row to travel is trickier. But I've had chances to do that. I think I'm in, if you count Washington, D.C. as its own thing, I think I performed in 7 states now. The furthest I've traveled was I did a festival in Chicago last year called the Chicago Nerd Comedy Festival, which was an absolutely delightful festival to be part of, and I'm hoping to do that again this year.
That's cool. I wanna check that out this year. I'm pretty close to Chicago, so that would be a cool one to check out.
Yeah, the people that run it are just fantastic people. It's a great mix of stand-up and improv and sketch, and they did nerdy themed burlesque shows, which is all they really existed. It's not you'll never forget seeing someone do a burlesque routine as Krusty the Clown with pasties that say "Hey, hey" coverings.
That's cool.
So that was a great time. I'm from more like central Pennsylvania originally, Lancaster County. So I've done more things in that area. I've done things out towards Philadelphia, but I've done some shows in Maryland and both Virginias, other places. Just done some stuff in Ohio, like the Cleveland area. So I'm definitely trying, especially since the album is done, I'm trying to do a lot more outside of Pittsburgh. It's just kind of that aspirational life versus real life balance is the trick. Yeah.
And it's definitely exhausting. I mean, just a little bit that I've done, I've got a full-time job too. And if you spend all weekend doing comedy, I mean, Monday's rough. So I understand. It's definitely another job when you start doing that stuff. So you were Lancaster County. You had the Pennsylvania Dutch and the Amish, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There were like one of my best friends from growing up is from the liberal side of his family because they use electricity.
Yeah.
And I know I've got some Pennsylvania Dutch genes and things in there. My dad's side of the family is from closer to Philadelphia, but my mom's side of the family is pretty much a straight Lancaster County. My high school, there were certain science classes. If you wanted to, you could opt out of it and instead take a farming class. And we need farmers. I totally support that. It's not my
right. Well, you come from a sturdy breed. I've got in our area just east of us, it's heavily Amish, and it's funny they've got different levels of Amish, and some of them have a phone booth at the end of their driveway, and some of them are allowed to use cell phones, some of them can't do that, and it's just it's a thing.
It's all these like Amish loopholes that stuff to do about being tied to the ground. Like you can have a cell phone if you charge it at your non-Amish neighbor's house.
Yep.
It's like just the idea of just like Amish legal scholars sitting around trying to find reasons to be able to do fun things is.
Yep.
So it's an idea that fascinates me just as a fairly secular person. The idea of we want to be modern, but we also believe these things. How do we reconcile?
And it's always weird to see a dead horse on the side of the road. I've seen it twice in my life, and they were both in the same area. And when they lose a horse, they just leave it, and somebody's got to come get it.
I have actually never encountered that in my area. Maybe they're a little bit better about it, or they, I don't know, hide them better. I've been stuck behind so many buggies, and there's a weekly huge farmers market that people from it's big enough that people from out of state travel to it, that I could walk to from the house I grew up in. And it's such a weird place because you can buy here's a homemade Amish shoe fly pie at one stand. And his stand beside it is selling illegal counterfeit Chinese Nike watches.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So, as we were getting to know each other before we started doing the interview, we've got something in common, and that's having some mental health issues, and I know that's something that's near and dear to your heart. Obviously, I think we're kind of as far as the symptoms, kind of the same: the depression, anxiety, and all that kind of stuff. Can you tell me a little bit about yours and how it's affected you, how it makes your comedy better, and so some of the things that come with that?
I mean, it's weird to say. Like you'll meet people that are able to just be like happy or content by default, and it seems like a superpower.
Yeah.
For me, it's something where like I've got mental illness on both sides of me, so I'm not surprised that I ended up with it. And then, like I said, my dad died. He was like my best friend. When I was 11, he was 40.
Mm-hmm.
And so that definitely amped things up. But in a weird way, it's comforting that I can remember, like when I was 10, I didn't have the phrase for like anxiety attack or depressive episode, but I can remember having things like that before my dad died. So in a weird way, it's comforting to knowing I don't have it because he died.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing in a weird way too about having it when you're very young is you get used to it by the time most people are starting to really deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I can think about how like literally the first person I ever talked out of suicide was a friend of mine in 10th grade, where I, a friend, and my friend's dad went to my other friend's house at 2 a.m. to make sure he didn't kill himself, and I did most of the talking. And my friend's dad, who was a pastor, was amazed at how calm I was and how I was able to handle everything and really talk to him. And I just said, that's the stuff I tell myself when I feel that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much mental health stuff is, even ignoring the stigma, people are scared about it. They're scared to say the wrong thing. And I think so often it's not about saying the right or the wrong thing. It's about letting people know they're not alone.
Right.
And just that you care. It's not, here's the phrase that makes you feel happy. It's just, hey, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been such a big thing for me. I'm very fortunate that my mom and I have a wonderful relationship. My sister and I have a great relationship, and they both have their issues as well. And I'm very fortunate that both my parents always taught me, it's okay to feel your feelings and it's okay to be a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine not having.
Right.
And that thing of like, no matter how depressed I am, I know who I am. Like whether I feel good or whether I feel bad, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. It's just which parts seem louder at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps a lot when you've been through bad things like my dad dying, or I had a really, really bad experience the first time I was in college. I've dropped out of college twice, mostly due to mental health issues both times. And the first time I was there, it's always weird because I wasn't necessarily trying to kill myself. It was a thing of, I'm doing this thing that will probably kill me. I don't necessarily want it to, but if it does, I'm okay with it.
Mm-hmm. Was that like drugs and alcohol?
Sleeping pills.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always had insomnia trouble since I was a kid. And when I was in college, my doctor gave me a script for Ambien. And eventually I built up a tolerance to it. I continued building a tolerance to it as it took more and more. And the one night, eventually, it was just a thing of like, all right, I just want to stop. If I sleep, I sleep. If I die, I die. I really don't care.
Mm-hmm. And
I took enough that probably should have killed me. But fortunately, I threw it all up and I vomited. The one person told me the clinical term they use is coffee grounds, basically where you throw up like black chunks, which means you're bleeding internally and your stomach walls are dissolving.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so depressed and so out of it. I was living by myself at the time that like I didn't go to a hospital. I didn't tell anyone. It was just, okay, I'm still here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I'm very, very thankful that I'm still here, and that didn't go the way it could have otherwise.
Mm-hmm. What helped you, first of all, recognize that, you had a serious issue with the depression, and how do you feel now?
Every day is different, really. It's always there. Like I said, it just depends on how loud it's.
Right.
And one of the things that's nice, because I've dealt with it my entire adult life and most of my childhood, is when it starts to get worse, I'm able to kind of mentally step back and say, like, okay, you're having more trouble than usual. Let's look at what's going on. Has something happened recently? Or is this just your brain balance is off and you're going to hate yourself for 3 days?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's something that happened externally, like, okay, those are things we can work at. You had a fight with this thing at work, or you had a really bad show. Or if it's just, oh, nope, I'm just going to struggle for 3 days. Okay, then that's going to be my next 3 days. And it's just to remind myself that this is not permanent. Don't make any drastic decisions, good or bad. Don't think, well, I'm going to go just waste my money at a casino, or I'm going to go quit my job, or I'm going to do, it's just that if the best you can do is go to work and put on the customer service show, go home and go to bed, that's the best you can do. If you call off work a day and you spend the day watching Futurama reruns, then that's the best you can do. But there's certainly a lot worse things to do as well.
Right. I know that one thing that you can do is totally step out of character and do something stupid, just because you want to erase that feeling for a while, and that stupid thing that you do could, it could get you arrested or make you lose your job and lose friends and all that kind of stuff. So just being able to understand what it is, I think, is the big part, and then understanding how to deal with it comes along after that.
Yeah, it's the same way of, if you're somebody who, like, you have an easily upset stomach. Okay, I understand. If I eat certain types of foods, I'm just going to have to make sure I plan out time to be near a bathroom. I have a certain days where it's all right. I save, like at work, I save my sick days for, like, I will sooner go into work physically ill versus like, nope, I just can't do it today. I need a mental health day. Because I find it's easier to like feel positive but physically ill versus like, no, I just can't put on the customer service show today.
Yeah. I totally relate to that. That's great. So obviously in the business you're in, the business we're in, the stand-up comics, I think the mildest thing you can say about them is we're misfits. There's something a little off about all of us, and it doesn't matter. I mean, they could be the most outwardly confident-looking person in the world, but if you get into this type of art, then there's something missing in you that you're trying to fill up.
Oh, definitely. I don't think like if you go to open mics, you'll see people in the first few weeks of comedy and they're not doing well, but they still seem really positive. Like, oh, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go back to my good job and do my, be with my wife or be with my spouse or kids or whoever. And, this is just something kind of fun I'm trying. Sometimes they'll stick with it, but a lot of the times they don't, because it's not that thing of I'm filling a hole by doing this.
Right.
The thing I have to look forward to today is my 5 minutes being mostly ignored by people watching the Penguins game.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely have to recognize that. I felt exactly that same way. So that's hilarious. So with that in mind, you get with a group of people, and I don't know if it's like this for you, but for me, you kind of find your tribe that way, in that you find people who have, if not the same issues, similar issues, and you can actually talk about it and not feel embarrassed or feel threatened or exposed in any way. You can talk about it, and I don't know how that is for you, but I thought that was really refreshing to me.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately for me, I've had a lot of those people in my life pre-comedy as well. Again, you find your similarly broken folk and you understand each other and you huddle together for warmth in the winter. But I also met more people again through comedy. People are very, very close and dear to me now that I would not have ever met otherwise. And there is that extra thing of, oh, good, we both deal with our problem the same as well.
Yeah. I do feel like it may be a little bit of a double-edged sword, because when that's your group, that's your tribe, and you have found some coping mechanisms that work for you, and they haven't found those coping mechanisms. I know that in some personality traits, they kind of want to drag you down, and get you to the depths that they're feeling. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword. I don't know if you've seen that, but I've seen that a little bit myself.
It can be, and there are people that try to do that, but it doesn't really affect me, because one of the things that, like, I don't mean to be like pitching a bit, but I've been trying to write this bit lately after the album about how the advantage of dealing with depression since you were a kid and surviving basically a suicide attempt is that no one else can hate you more than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, you think I'm not funny? Okay, great. thanks. That's the best you got, really? If people try to bring me down, no one externally can say anything. My own internal monologue does not tell me 20 times a day.
Right.
So there is that aspect of it. And I'm somebody too where, I know how lonely life can feel. And so I'm somebody who, if you're somebody I've even just kind of casually met at shows, and like I see you post on Facebook or Twitter that you're feeling really down, I'll most likely I'll reach out and just say like, hey, listen, I know we've just been on a few shows together. I know we're not the closest of people. I don't mean to like overstep any bounds, but if you want to just chat with somebody who I think gets what you're feeling, I'm around. If you don't want to, no offense taken, I completely understand.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing, because I've had people in my life that, when people force themselves on you, you tend to just push them back even further. So for me, it's just a thing of like, hey, if you need somebody just to be a fellow human, say, yeah, those things you're feeling don't make you bad. They just make you alive.
Right.
That's what I want to be around for.
Right. I've done that myself, and I'm a little older than you. I'm 55, and so I've dealt with it for a longer period of time. So I can speak to it and talk about when I felt my lowest, and also talk about my coping mechanisms, because I tell you what, sometimes you wake up and getting out of bed, you just feel like you got an elephant sitting on you, and it just ain't going to happen. And being able to talk yourself up and actually get through the day is just like it feels superhuman when you can do it.
Oh, it does. There are days where I'll find out. Even just the other day, apparently, when you work retail, people will have they tell customers, fill out the survey and let us know how we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I got 3 amazing customer surveys in one day. And I remember I was garbage that day, mental health wise, but I could really I'll put on the show, then I'll go in the bathroom for 5 minutes, recollect myself.
And the funny thing is the only person you can celebrate with when you make it through a day like that is yourself. Good job, Scott. Good job, Zach.
Yeah, it is acknowledging the little achievements of like, hey, I dressed myself today.
Yeah.
All right.
I survived another day. This is fantastic. It's the best day ever.
Yeah, because there's that thing of, I never like the phrase things can always be worse, because sometimes that's really stretching.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have to find things to be thankful for. Like I mentioned, I'm lucky. I have a very great relationship with my family, and I wouldn't wish the things we've been through on people, but I would much rather have an amazing, thoughtful, just insightful mom that I have, and the dad that I had, versus 2 parents that are still around who like, oh yeah, I got a chunk of my DNA from them. Other than that, I just don't really have a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I found for years after I dropped into college for the first time, I worked in a group home taking care of intellectually disabled adults.
Mm-hmm.
And, that helps give you a lot of perspective too of, like, yeah, I had a really bad day, but things, can be worse. And it doesn't take away from the bad, but that perspective helps.
Right. Once again, it gets you through the day, and that's that's important. It's a one day at a time thing. Not to sound cliche, but that's kind.
It really is. Like I've said to friends at times, sometimes you'll find the stupidest thing that keeps you going. Like I was telling a story to a friend the other day, because as a kid and as an adult, I absolutely love Weird Al Yankovic.
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid, I listened to Weird Al, but I didn't really listen to like popular music. So like I knew some of the songs were parodies, but I didn't know what they were parodies of, things like that. And he does those polka melodies on each album. And the album Bad Hair Day, where Amish Paradise comes from, came out right around the time my dad died. And that album has a song called The Alternative Polka, where it's a bunch of songs from the mid 90s and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't know pop culture, the part where he does the lyrics from Soundgarden's Black Hole Sun, I did not know that song and didn't bother to read the lyrics in the liner book. So when Weird Al sings Black Hole Sun, won't you come and wash away the rain, as a kid, because of the cadence and tempo he sings it in, I heard Life Goes On, won't you come and wash away the rain. And like that got me through some days as a kid.
Yeah, that's cool.
And as an adult, you hear that song, I'm like, oh, mishearing lyrics as a child got me through some days.
Mm-hmm.
That's stupid, but it matters because it got me through those days.
Yeah. That's
How, if it's I really want to see this movie that's coming out. Okay, then you're sticking around for that.
mm-hmm.
And then that's out. You'll find something else to for.
Right.
And it's it's incredibly hard to find that thing some days.
Mm-hmm. You said something there about not knowing the pop culture of your time. I've also found that comics, a lot of them tend to be outliers, and they are not driven by current events or pop culture or anything like that. We all have our own beat that we march to, and I think that's what makes us unique. And the biggest outliers seem to be the best comics, in my opinion.
I think that's a very fair assessment.
Yeah. And it's fun to be an outlier because you don't have to be into everything that everybody else is into.
Yeah, you find that comfortable place of all right, this is what I am.
Uh-huh.
If you like it, cool. If you don't, okay, you got your own thing.
Yeah,
that's totally fine.
Right. So I've asked, I think, a couple people this. I just every once in a while I like to bring this up. In comedy, what was your worst experience?
Oh, man, worst experience. There's a few that come to mind. So the first one was right around the time it would have been a year since I started performing, where two of my friends who are other comedians got in touch with me. They were like, hey, somebody dropped out of this show. The two of us, and if you're free, you could fill in and we get paid. And it's like we would drive out to this place an hour away and perform. And I was really excited because I was still fairly new and this would have been my first paying gig.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to the venue and it is literally a barn that got converted into a bar and a grill. So it still has all the barn posts and everything everywhere. Everyone there had on NASCAR shirts, Confederate flag hats. It was, so when you're a liberal intellectual comedian, that's really your audience.
Yeah.
And I tried to do my best, but I had a horrible set, and both my friends bombed. And the headliner did an hour of street jokes. Hey, did you hear the one about because the crowd was eating those up. I don't know if he may have written original jokes in his life, but it was all just generic jokes.
Mm.
And they ate it up. So we were all just so angry. And because we had driven all this way to do this crappy show. And like, so are we leaving? We got to wait to get paid. So we're hanging around for about a half an hour. And one of the comedians that from that, I think it was that day he had decided to quit smoking. So he was extra on edge. And so kind of the leader of our group of three goes over to talk to the owner of the place, comes back 5 minutes, just like, get in the car, we're going now. I'm like, well, what about getting paid? He's like, just get in the car, we're going now. And the guy basically had said, well, I had a deal with that other fella to pay, but I didn't have a deal with you fellas. So he did not pay us.
Oh, man.
So there was stuff like that. These weren't even necessarily the worst places I've had, but one of the most memorable was for about a year or two in West Virginia, a little over an hour drive from Pittsburgh, there was a Insane Clown Posse themed coffee shop. It did comedy night. And just that was such a surreal place to perform in. Like people hanging again, like if you're into ICP, if you're a juggalo, great, that's your thing.
Uh-huh.
Just the idea of like, oh, there's people hanging out in full clown makeup. They weren't at a concert. That's just how they feel comfortable. And I'm very minimalist. Like I'm just okay. Yeah, this is what I put on for the day. I hate wearing suits. Anything that requires extra effort, just like. And again, just like I forget, I had this old joke, I forget what even book it was about, but just one lady in the audience just yelled like, we don't like books here. I'm like, oh, this is or I did a friend of mine was supposed to headline a high school like volleyball team fundraiser. He got this really good offer to do a show out of town, and so I filled in for him. Myself and these other two comedians. So we get to the thing, and it's about 40 minutes south of Pittsburgh. It's more rural, more conservative. And so I planned on, I'm not going to try anything political unless, do have a good set. So we get there and the organizers say, now we have a raffle planned, 50-50, all that kind of stuff. And we want to do that in the middle of the show. And all the comedians, and I'm sure you probably have this too, were like, no, you don't break up the show.
Mm-hmm.
You break up the show, you're basically putting on two shows. It totally resets the crowd, especially this kind of thing where it's everyone's brought bottles of alcohol and is getting very drunk because they're all parents, friends, and that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
So the show starts off with the volleyball coach talking, and he talks for about 5 minutes about the team. Then he says, well, let me get who you really want to talk to. Ducks behind the stage, comes back out with like big fake glasses on and does this reverend character that absolutely kills for 10 minutes. Because, again, it's all inside jokes with the parents and the players.
Right.
And that kind of. First comic goes up, does his 10, 15 minutes, does all right. Second comic goes up, does his 10, 15 minutes, does all right. I'm waiting to go on. I'm supposed to do 45 minutes to an hour. Like, I'm just about to walk up to the stage, and one of the organizers comes over to me and says, all right, we're going to do the raffle now. And I said, that's not what we agreed on. This is not going to. And she said, I know, but it'll just take 5 minutes. We're going to do the raffle now. So half an hour later, one of the organizers walks up to the microphone and says, all right, and now here's your last comedian for the evening, Zach Funk, and just walks off.
Oh, no.
Everyone, because at this point, if it's been a half an hour break and everyone's drinking and eating, you're done.
Uh-huh.
So I got up there and I did the best I could for about the first 20 minutes, because I tried to stick to like work stories and kind of more basic stuff.
Mm.
About 7 minutes in, this lady at a table just randomly yelled out, my husband has longer hair than you. And I wasn't talking about my hair. There was nothing about my hair going on at that time. She's like, all right, are we establishing object permanence? What exactly is happening here? And it kept going on. And I could tell it was that thing of like, if you give me a chance and I fail, okay, that's on me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you set me up to fail, then I don't care.
Right.
So at about the 20-minute mark, I thought, all right, I wasn't going to do political jokes now because no one cares. I'm going to do political material that I'm working on right now because I need to practice these things. So as soon as I started into that, a different person at a table just jumped out of her chair and screamed, no! What? No politics! And 2 minutes after that, I hit the half-hour point, and they had already given me my check before I got on stage. And the door to leave was right beside the stage. So I saw it was about a half hour, 35 minutes. I knew nothing good could come from me talking anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I had everything with me on stage. So I said, you know what? You folks get home safe. You have a good night. Just walked off the stage, out the door, got in my car, stopped at the first ATM I could to deposit the check. just went home.
Oh, that's rough. Yeah. Everybody's got stories like that. I just like to showcase those types of stories because there's a lot of new comics listening, and I want them to know that it's not all roses and gold for you. But the nice thing about those really bad ones is it either gives you material or it gives you something to talk to other comics about. So it's those war stories are always good.
I think I would rather have like a spectacular failure show than just like, oh, that was a boring show.
Yeah.
Because at least you get a story. There's an experience where it's just, oh, I talked. They weren't really that into it. And then
Right. One last thing, Zach. So you've been performing for 9 years now. What do you wish you would have known when you started that you know now?
The biggest thing I think would have been start earlier. Like it's something like comedy. Like I had thought about doing comedy when I was in high school, but there wasn't a place to do it at. There was a Clever 2 in Pittsburgh when I was in college, but I didn't drink until I was 23. And I knew those places had a 2-drink minimum. And so I thought, well, if I don't drink, I guess I can't go.
Mm-hmm.
And the first open mic I ever did, I found out about because I met someone at a speakeasy theme party at an art gallery. We went on one date, and as we walked around town, she said, do you want to see my friend at this comedy open mic? And I was like, wait, there's just a place you can get on stage and you can talk and you can do that. And then the next week I did it.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the biggest thing. Otherwise, I don't know, I don't think I'd change much else just because, for the good or the bad, we are who are experiencing us.
Mm.
And, like you can tell someone get used to failure, but that's something that you can tell them that, but until you really get used to it, it doesn't matter what they tell you.
Right.
And just, be yourself and that'll work for you.
Mm-hmm.
If people like it, great. And if they don't, then that's okay too. They're doing their own thing.
Right. One of the things I'm reading a book right now, and I can't think of the name of it, but they talk about writing. Do you have any kind of a scheduled writing time, or do you just write things down as they come and get to them when you can?
It depends. It's more of a get to it when I can, or when things kind of hit in a weird way, like one of the like the mental health stuff, for example. Many times you talk about mental health with a crowd. If the crowd likes you, you have to kind of ease them into it, because you'll have to let them know it's okay to laugh at this. You're not laughing at me, you're laughing with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I opened the mental health stuff with the joke about no more tears shampoo not working as an antidepressant.
Right.
And I literally wrote that joke when I was depressed and taking a shower.
Mm-hmm.
That was just something that popped into my head where I was really, really sad and I was taking a shower and I looked at the bottle and I was like, this is bullshit. This doesn't work at all. And then it was a thing of like, oh yeah, wait, that's actually decent. Maybe you can build that into something.
Right.
And just, as someone who does a lot of storytelling type, it's, finding things in my life, what could be an interesting story, and then how can I play it up? How can I make it more exaggerated, or how can I kind of build something into it? Most of the time, it really is just a train of thought. It'll be, I'll write down, okay, here's an idea for a bit, or here's an idea for a story, and then I just have to go on stage to a mic and try it out, and then through that, I kind of work out a rhythm to it and figure out, is this worth salvaging? And then once I get it to a point where I feel good about it, then I might actually write some stuff down and make it a bit more permanent and solid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do it, and I'm going to be interviewing a guy coming up that he wrote a book called I think Not Good Yet, and his name's Mark Masters, and he actually in his 40s decided he was going to pursue stand-up comedy, and he's in Denver, and they've got a pretty good comedy scene there. So he just decided he was going to do all the open mics he could to get good at comedy, and then wrote a book about that. But his routine is he does a 20-20-20 every morning. So he meditates for 20 minutes, he writes for 20 minutes, and he reads for 20 minutes. And that's it seems like a good thing to actually get a habit, because personally I procrastinate on everything, and the only time I really get focused on something is if I have a show coming up and I want to make sure that I've got everything tight for the show, or if I want to throw something new into it. That up until then, I'm just skating. I show up to an open mic and I either do old stuff or I do new stuff that isn't even halfway hashed out. So I'm thinking about trying that. The only thing is it makes you have to get up an hour earlier. So.
Yeah, I'm very much I stay in bed until the last possible moment before I go to work.
Yeah.
But a lot of it will be, just I'll see something or an idea pops to my head, and I'll post it on Facebook, or I'll post it on Twitter or something like that. Mm-hmm. And if it kind of gets a response, then I can think, okay, well, maybe I can build something off of that. Mm-hmm. And then I will talk about it on stage and just kind of improv it and just kind of see, all right, here's the core concept. Let's just see where this leads me as I talk. Mm-hmm. Where when I try to write things out word for word, because even before I ever performed, I've always had a writing background. And when I sit down to try to write stuff, I get too caught up in finding like the exact right word. Mm-hmm. It just feel right. And the thing I love about performing, like you could put me in front of a crowd of 500 people and I am more relaxed than I am in front of a blank page by myself, because with the blank page, you can go back and forth. You can get stuck on a sentence for half an hour because it just doesn't feel okay. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you're talking in front of an audience, if something hits, it hits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But you can't say, hold on, let me go back and try it this way. So the momentum means you can't stop moving.
Right.
And I don't get caught up in my own thoughts. It's more, because that's the big thing for me. If I sit down to write something, then you get into the self-doubt. Well, that's garbage. That could be a lot better. Now, what is this? This is trash. Versus when you're on stage, it's just, oh, that didn't work. Okay, I have to keep talking.
Right. Yeah, you have to fill the space. So yeah, that definitely makes sense. Well, I've had you on here for about an hour now. Your voice is probably tired. Mine's getting there. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. Folks, his album is called Brains Are Weird. It's on Spotify. It's on all the ways you listen to music and comedy albums. I would ask that if you like it, you buy it, because that's how comics actually make money. So if I were to put that on Spotify and stream it 365 days, 24 hours a day, I think you probably make maybe 50 cents. So
something like that.
Yeah, Spotify doesn't pay well. So I always tell people, if you like it, buy it, because that's how we've survived. So it's a very good album. I definitely knew who you were after I listened to it, and it's a very good hour and 11 minutes. So I thought it was great. If people want to get a hold of you, can you throw out your Facebook page and your Twitter handle?
Yeah. So my Twitter is @ZFunkYeah, YEHA. My Facebook is just Zach Funk Comedy. Instagram, I'm ZFunkYeah.
Okay.
You can find me on YouTube. Also, if you're looking for stuff I do on YouTube, there is a channel that I'm a co-host on. My best friend from college and current roommate, he and I do things like video game reviews and make weird themed cocktails, and the channel is called Is It Worth a Sandwich? Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of fun. Is It Worth a Sandwich? That was a real broke college student metric of like, oh, I can spend $15 on this really cheap video game, or I can eat dinner. Which do I want to do?
Yeah.
So that's why we named it that. But you can find me on YouTube. Get a chance to listen, good, bad. Send me feedback, because it's just like you said, like money's important. We need money. I would love to be able to do this full time. But sometimes just knowing people listen. Like recently, somebody from an old job sent me a message saying they listened to my album, and hearing the way I talked about mental illness helped them describe their own feelings to their partner better.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, like laughter is fantastic, but knowing that I helped somebody blows laughter out of the water.
Yep. That's great. And it's very important, because comics tend to be kind of insular with their feelings. And so you don't get a lot of feedback from other comics. So you need it from somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you get really close with a few of them, you don't get feedback, good or bad, from them sometimes. And so hearing the positive and knowing where you could get better always helps. But yeah, that was a great album. I really appreciate you being on the show. It's Zach Funk, and he works in the Pittsburgh area, and the name of the album is Brains Are Weird. I will also post links to all your social media stuff in the show notes.
Thank you so much. It's been really great chatting. Glad to be here.
Great. Thank you.